Writers of the Boom, which is brought to you by Kimberly Crum and myself as co-editors and authors in the Boom Project. Today, we are honored to have one of the authors of the story Bombs Away, Mark Williams, who is going to read some of his work from the Boom Project and also some new poems. Mark is an English major who graduated from Vanderbilt University. He lives in Evansville, Indiana, and is a retired real estate agent. So, Mark, I'm going to turn it over to you and let you read to us.
Thank you, Bonnie. Thank you very much for having me today. I thought I'd read a couple poems. The first poem was published in a magazine that Bonnie and Kim Crum edit called Landslide Lit. I was very happy to be accepted into their very fine magazine. This poem is called Sheltered in Place, and it begins with an epigraph by Robert Burns. My heart's in the highlands, my heart is not here. My heart's in the highlands a-chasing the deer, chasing the wild deer and following the roe. My heart's in the highlands, wherever I go. With time as slippery as the olive oil I smear on our skillet, I begin preparations for the 4th or 5th or possibly 12th weekly sheltered in place omelet for DG and me. Tonight, we're settling down to dinner and episode 7, season 1 of A Place to Call Home, an Australian Downton Abbey in which Sister Sarah Adams returns to New South Wales after nursing Republican loyalists in the Spanish Civil War, marrying her Jewish lover, converting to his faith, and spending 2 years in a concentration camp at Ravensbrück. But so far, Sister Adams, why is a Jewish nurse called Sister, has discovered home to be anything but where her heart is. By now, we have finished our omelet. Sister Adams is pretending to renounce her faith so her Catholic mother can die peacefully as I leave our living room and repair to the garage. At this time, allow me to explain that with COVID-19 raging, we store our non-perishable items in the garage a few days, which explains why I retrieve a bag of cashews from the garage floor before sprinkling my nightly nut dose into an orange measuring cup, grabbing a beer and returning to our dimly lit room, where Sister Adams is being comforted by George Bly, a rich sheep farmer she met on her ocean voyage from Europe to Australia. Sister Adams is crying, George Bly is comforting, and suddenly, after glancing down at my remaining nuts, I am screaming at the surviving army of large black ants hiking up Mount Cashew. Like Sister Adams, there was a time my heart was not at home, a time I could fit all of my belongings into a 1973 Ford Pinto parked in Nashville. One Saturday night, I put on my cowboy hat, walked down Broadway, and sneaked into the Ryman. Out in the West Texas town of El Paso, I fell in love with a Mexican girl. Nighttime would find me in Rose's cantina. Music would play and Felina would whirl. Sang Marty Robbins as drops from someone's beverage in the balcony hit my hat like heartbeats. But I was not in love. In all likelihood, I would never meet Felina. I would never whirl with her or anyone. Tonight, I run out the door and into our yard screaming, not so much over the surviving ants as those who didn't. I fling the homeless ants and unsuspecting cashews beneath our holly tree, where DG sometimes leaves uneaten cat food for squirrels, raccoons, and possums. Entering the house, measuring cup in hand, I think there's no place I'd rather be sheltered in place in than here, where our next episode is about to begin.
Aww.
And I will read one more poem. This poem appeared in a magazine called Typishly earlier this year. It's called The Hokey Pokey. I would think a lot of baby boomers would remember The Hokey Pokey. My doctor has jumped ship, going into private practice, very private, since I don't know where he's going. My blood pressure's up, I tell Christy, the 16-year-old nurse practitioner assigned to me. Can you call in a new prescription and order blood work? Oh, and don't forget to test my PSI, please. Christy looks at me, shirtless on the table, and says, you mean your PSA, prostate specific antigen. Above her mask, green eyes smile. PSI is the reading you get at the Marathon Station air pump. But considering the tire I've added to my middle, Christy should probably order a PSI test too. As for the questions I had to answer on the tablet when I checked in, do you feel depressed? Have you recently experienced any feelings of hopelessness? Do you have trouble sleeping? Give me a break. Who doesn't? Who hasn't? And when was the last time you slept 8 hours? No, 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 I answered. By now, we've reached the part of the poem where you're expecting the bright red cardinal that perches in a leafless tree on a bleak winter day to shake me off the barren branch on which I've landed. But I'm sorry, he doesn't shake me off my branch. I'm more likely to mention the possum couple, Harry and Harriet, who munch on fallen seeds each night beneath our bird feeders. One night, my wife and I were watching Harry and Harriet when, given how Harry seems to largely ignore Harriet, I questioned his, spell along with me now, Libido. Only I pronounced it libido, accent on the li, short I, instead of libido. Well, I wish you could have been there. If DG's PSI had read 32 pounds per square inch before I said libido, it would have read 15 by the time she finished laughing. If she had had a tire pressure monitoring system, her light would have been flashing. In truth, I laughed too. There we were, the two of us, shaking with laughter as our cat ran out of the room. But when I finished laughing, I felt good. Very good. Nothing wrong with my libido. In conclusion, when you put your right foot in, your mouth, in this instance, shake it all about. Turn yourself around. Then, what are you waiting for? Put your whole self in. And when you do, notice all the people with their whole selves in, turning themselves around, shaking all about. That's what it's all about.
Very nice. That was delightful. Thank you for that. Please go on.
Thank you. Those are the only two poems I brought. I assume that's enough.
Okay. That was wonderful. Tell us about your earlier publications, your first publication, perhaps.
Back in the early 1980s, there were two people who became friends, Mark Jarman, the poets, Mark Jarman and Robert McDowell. And they both at one time or another taught at what's now the University of Southern Indiana in Evansville. And we became friends. And fortunately for me, they started a magazine called The Reaper. And it was a magazine that was dedicated to narrative poetry. And I was fortunate they accepted a couple of my poems in 1986, 1987. Those were my first publications.
And the rest is history, so they say.
Well, so to speak.
Do you have a writing ritual, or how does your writing practice go? I think we're always interested in knowing that, because they can all be so different.
Well, I write both fiction and short stories, and every morning I start out, I read a short story, not the same story, but then I read a couple of poems. Most recently, from my friend Linda Rising, who I think you know. She's in the Boom Project as well. And Linda's written a wonderful book called Stone Roses. And I just finished it. I was reading 2 or 3 poems a day, and I highly recommend it. It's available on Amazon. Then I write for an hour and a half. And usually in the later part of the afternoon, I write for another hour and a half, usually with Redbud, our cat, in my lap. But I do really try to write every day. And for me, I think that's very important. It's kind of like exercise. If I exercise as well, but if I miss a day or two, it's easy to miss 2 or 3 more days. So I'm careful to write something every day.
Thank you for that. Do you have favorite writers or writers that you return to, writers that you use as inspiration?
In fiction, I always loved and still do love Kurt Vonnegut, John Irving. Let's see. Well, and more recently, George Saunders. I love George Saunders' short stories in particular, and a wonderful short story writer, novelist, playwright, psychiatrist. The guy is like a Renaissance man, Jacob Appel. I've read, gosh, 8 or 10 of his books of short stories. And in poetry, well, David Kirby, George Bilgier, Ellen Bass, Billy Collins, Linda Rising. Those would be my favorites.
Thank you. That's a pretty impressive list right there. I would ask you, as I ask many of our writers, if you have a writing philosophy that you could sum up in 5 or 6 words, maybe a mantra of sorts.
Well, I might have known this question was coming, and I gave that some thought. And I think I can maybe cut it down to 4 if I quit talking about it. I would say my words would be, if possible, find humor. And I think that's how I view both my poems and my short stories. And
your life, I suspect.
I think it's very important.
I think it is. I would agree with you.
Our household is full of laughter.
No doubt. Just from our having known you through the Boom Project, we think of you as being witty, humorous, and that certainly helps anyone's outlook during this past pandemic.
Especially this past year.
Yes. Are there any other tips or anything else you would like to say to listeners that we haven't asked?
Well, I've thought about that as well. Not long after I had my poems published in the Reaper, this would have been still in the 1980s, I had 3 poems accepted at the Hudson Review and a short story accepted at Indiana Review. And I thought, boy, this is going to be great. I thought, this is going to be smooth sailing from here. And I sent out maybe 12 or 15 other submissions, and they were all turned down. And I was really discouraged, and so discouraged, in fact, that I gave up writing for at least 10 years and didn't start writing again until the early 2000s. I mentioned Jacob Appel earlier. There's a wonderful Netflix documentary called Jacob. Now, I recommend it to any writer or non-writer. As I say, he's kind of a Renaissance man. And in addition to the 10 or so books of short stories, a novel, a play, countless essays, well, he's a prolific writer, and no telling how many publications. But in the course of that documentary, he said he'd had received over 20,000 rejections.
Wow.
And I thought, and I quit writing after a dozen or so. And that just made such an impression on me. And now I receive lots of rejections, as I think probably every writer does. And after hearing that, they just really don't bother me as much. And I thought it might be important for any writer to hear that.
Yes, certainly it is. Kim, do you have anything you would like to ask Mark or comment on? You've been very quiet.
Yes, that's enforced quietude per mute, but I am heard now, right? So I love all of this, Mark. There's humor in your writing, but it's naturally provided. It's not humor in which the author is laughing at himself while writing it. It's humor in life, and that if possible, find humor. I am wondering, and this is not really writing so much as just life in general, how do you find life to be funny? When did you realize that you could see ordinary things in life as being funny? Because in everything you write, whether it's serious or not, I laugh.
Well, I think, and I think that there's no doubt about it that I was influenced by my father. My father found humor in everything. When I graduated from college, I didn't know what I was going to do. And I actually went to work in a psychiatric hospital for 1.5 years. And my dad said, gosh, there has to be an easier way to make a living. And Dad had a real estate company, and I came home, got a license, and sold real estate. And oh my, the stories I could tell. And the humor my dad gave me, that's where it comes from.
Yeah. So the ability to see the incongruities and
yes.
the silliness of life, even if it seems difficult,
yes.
is partly gift, but it sounds like you've developed that.
Well, and I think I mentioned Kurt Vonnegut earlier, and John Irving. They would take a novel like Slaughterhouse-Five about the devastation of Dresden in World War II, but there's humor throughout that book. It's a very funny book, and he can just hit you with brutality in one sentence and laughter in the next. And to me, that's how life is.
Yes, yeah.
So I'm influenced by that. I've been influenced by that too. John Irving is the same way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think anyone has a good wit if they can joke about ants in their cashews, including the ones that didn't survive.
though it was not funny at the time.
No. Yeah, that's the truth. It's like our parents say, you'll laugh about this someday.
Right. Exactly.
So, anyhow,
though I will say DG was laughing even when I wasn't.
Oh. Well, that helps too, is to have someone that can kind of temper our anxieties or our consternation.
Exactly.
Well, Mark, we have enjoyed talking with you. We appreciate your time. We appreciate your writing, and we certainly thank you for the wide array of literature that you have inspired us to go take a look at that we might not know already. And we wish you the best. What are you working on right now?
I'm working on another long story. In fact, I think I just finished the first draft of it. I've been working on it about 4 months. And I think really just this morning, I would say I finished the first draft. Now I'll rewrite it, and I'm very quick to use to send my stories out for criticism long before I begin submitting them anywhere. So that would be the next step.
Okay. Well, best of luck, and we look forward to reading it.
Yes.
So, say hi to DG for us, your sweet wife, and again, thank you for being with us.
Thank you. Thank you both very much.
And we'll work on finding humor today.
Yes.
Thank you so much. We'll see you soon in Evansville.
Goodbye, both of you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.